Hi everybody and welcome to another episode of Beyond the Tech. Today we are celebrating 50 years of Microsoft. I'm joined by my colleagues Mini, Adam and Rich. Hi guys.
Hi Rob.
Hello.
Hello. So I thought today we would dive in as we celebrate 50 years of Microsoft, 1975. Makes me feel old because I am also 50 this year. Those birthday stickers that I got from Microsoft will be quite useful on my birthday, cutting costs. I thought we'd start though with some personal memories of our life or our journey, whether that's work or whether that's through social, through Microsoft. So I should start being the oldest, but I thought I'd hand the torch over to Mini to start.
Thanks, Rob. So I'll introduce myself really quickly. So I'm Mini Biswas and I'm a modern work security and AI specialist at Cisilion. I've been here around 8-9 months now, but I've been in the industry for about 15 years now. So at Cisilion, I head up the Microsoft funded engagement. So you'll see more about me when it comes to Copilot and security. But yeah, going back to your question, Rob, lots of personal memories. And I have to say the main one being it's kind of shaped my whole career. I kickstarted professionally 15 years ago, working at a large account reseller. And it was all about Microsoft licensing, multiple licenses, 365, BPOS, all of these terminologies that you hear about. But personally, it all started when I think I was around 13 in 2001. I created my first Hotmail account. And that was a really cool experience for me. And then also being at school at the time, using Microsoft Word. And that was the first time I ever got to learn the name Microsoft. And it was just everywhere from there for me. And obviously I'll share more throughout the experiences, but I will hand over to Adam.
Thanks, Mini. I'm Adam Hand, Head of Digital Workplace. And I head up our Microsoft pre-sales team here at Cisilion. So we get involved in a lot of conversations across the whole Microsoft stack. From my earliest memories, which going back quite some way, really started out probably from about Windows 95, from when I was finishing GCSEs and then obviously into college and uni and those type of things as well. But I've been in the industry for 22 years and started off away at the very beginning, as like a lot of people do from IT perspectives, at a help desk for a large motor company in terms of that. But in terms of the journey, there's been lots along the way in terms of using Exchange 5.5 all the way through to obviously 2019 now, the emergence of cloud in terms of where Microsoft have come and the journeys in there. But there's quite a lot of, I would say, experience and knowledge during that time. But it's had its challenges and its bumps along the way as well, as I'm sure all of you could probably attest to as well. But it's been a fantastic journey. Rich, what about you?
Yeah, Richard Tolley, Unified Communications and Collaboration Practice Lead, but also look after the Cloud and Modern Workspace team as well. And I think mine goes back to probably as far as I can remember, to be honest with you, in terms of my first involvements with Microsoft, which was, I remember vividly phoning my dad when I was about 5 years old and asking him how I could do the 2 dots because I wanted to change directory to go to the A drive so I could load one of my games off a floppy disk. But it went through all ages and it was always there. I remember getting a phone call from my head teacher at primary school. I was off one day with tonsillitis. Rich, how do we get this banking app running on the Windows operating system? And I'd have to go to the phone.
E5 then?
I was 8 or 9 years old, one of the two, somewhere around that. But yeah, it was one of those ones. My mum calling me off the settee to stop watching Star Wars and go and speak to my headmaster about how to get the banking app up and running on a Windows OS. But all the way from Windows 3.1, 3.11, it was one of those ones where it's just been a mainstay in my life. And it's a product and a set of products that my whole career has been based around. So moving away from server operating systems, Active Directory, all that sort of good stuff, reinventing yourself along the way, ended up on Unified Communications, and that's where it's brought me to today. So,
Amazing journey. And yes, so adding to the mix, so I'm Rob Quickenden, I'm the CTO here at Cisilion, and my journey, so mine started, I was trying to work this out earlier on, I think it was really about the 97, 98 days, so internet was kind of a thing. I was on an industrial placement year at university. I had exposure to Microsoft technologies kind of before, but growing up I was very much in the Commodore camp, so I was Commodore VIC-20, 16, 64, Amiga, which still today sits somewhere in my loft collecting dust. And I got involved in the Windows ecosystem, really. Yeah, Windows 3.11, Novell NetWare in the day. And my first kind of job, really, was working on oil rigs for a company called Arco British, doing Windows 3.11 to Windows 95 upgrades on very chunky plastic IBM ThinkPad devices, now known as Lenovo, where they had battery. I think the screen was about 8 inches or something like that. They were really quite small. So that was kind of where my life started.
No turbo buttons.
No, no, absolutely not. But certainly no Wi-Fi really or anything like that. I remember the PCMCIA little adapter cards and plugging these things in. So yeah, that's kind of where my kind of experiences start with Microsoft, and yeah, kind of been part of that journey ever since. And now sitting here looking after the technical strategy for a Microsoft and a Cisco reseller, where Microsoft makes up half of our business annually. So quite incredible actually to see where that journey come from. I think I actually started my role here because I wanted to work somewhere that wasn't all involved around Microsoft technology. So that kind of worked out quite well. So if we think about, I guess, we're here to celebrate 50 years of Microsoft, which is quite hard to believe, I think, for any kind of tech company to remain that dominant in the industry this far through their time. There's lots of products, lots of services, some successes, some failures that certainly spring to my mind. Be interesting, and I'm sure this will just be a trip down memory lane for all of us and spark some other imaginations. But Mini, what are some of your earliest memories of good, bad, ugly Microsoft products that are stuck in your mind?
I mean, I would have to say majority are good because it's helped shape my career. But I have to say, when there was this huge shift moving from on-premise to cloud, and this real transformation that Microsoft was bringing to the market, and that was Office 365 back then, or BPOS even. I remember those
Which
earlier...
stood for... Remind everyone what BPOS stood for?
I don't remember. Business productivity,
business
something.
Productivity, Office Suite.
Office Suite, that's it. I got it nearly right. But I remember having those earlier conversations with clients and businesses who basically said, no, we're not ready. We're happy with looking at our data in the server comms room, no backup, no nothing. And for some organizations, it was very much win-win. Yeah, we want to go for a software as a service platform right away. We have Microsoft licensing. And it was almost even easier that Microsoft was creating this environment, talking to businesses to try getting new logos under their belt as well. So I've really seen that huge success shoot through from a cloud perspective and what Microsoft has brought to the table, and look where it is now, and look at that market share they've gone through as well, not just from just cloud of Exchange or SharePoint or Teams, but even like all these other elements they've added to the portfolio around, Copilot now, around security and all these other areas. The ugly, I mean, I've heard lots of rumors around Windows 7. Is it Windows 7?
Vista, I think.
Vista, that's it. Vista.
Edition.
Yeah. But honestly,
Vista,
that's it. But otherwise, no, not really. I've heard all great things and been part of some great success stories of what Microsoft brought to the table. But yeah, the biggest one being Office 365, moving to Microsoft 365 and the whole suite around that. So.
And it's a big change as well. Like when you mentioned that BPOS, when it came out, that was a big change in terms of, I think, the market and what organisations could do with Microsoft technologies. Because for me, for starting out previously, a lot of stuff was installed in their data centres, in their offices and those type of things. So even going back to like using Exchange, like with 5.5 and then upgrading to 2003, and then obviously going through the next versions, 2007, a lot of those companies made that jump from 2003 to 2010. And then obviously to start seeing Microsoft start to host that and put that in the cloud, massively changed kind of, I think, where they are then through to where they are today. Because you think BPOS evolved to Office 365 and then obviously Microsoft 365 as we all know it today. But again, you just look at those technologies, because when it started off, I don't know if you all remember, but it was purely just email and SharePoint, really, in terms of where it is.
Yeah.
And now, obviously, you can get most of your services delivered that way as well. But even like great products or okay products, so that's, you got things like the in the consumer world with the Band or the Microsoft Zune, for anyone who remembers that, or Guardians of the Galaxy fans as well, with him upgrading from his Walkman in terms of that.
I do like that movie.
Yeah, that was fantastic.
That journey, though, it's an interesting piece. And again, another UC note from me. That's all you're going to get from me today. You can see where my bias is. But yeah, I remember back in the days when Skype Online first came out, and you're thinking, this is where it's going to go.
Yeah.
But, going back to then when it first arrived on the scene, and you'd sit down with a customer and you'd go, right, okay, what hunt groups have you got? Or are you using response groups? And they'd go, yes. And you go, right, you're staying on-prem then. And it was just one of those ones where those features and functions just weren't available back then. But then to see where it's at now in terms of feature parity with other PBX platforms and this, that, and the other, you'd be pretty hard pushed to find something that a customer needs from a phone system perspective that Teams can't do natively or you can't achieve with a third-party integration.
Even things like ExpressRoute, and that all integrated in to make it happen. Microsoft gave all these different areas and elements to enable that full solution end to end, didn't they?
Yeah.
I think the other thing that it's done as well, and it's interesting, you touched on some of those points around, you'd look at something like Skype Online and kind of go, well, do you need that? Well, okay, that's good for you. If not, you need on-prem. And I think it's really interesting to see that when we think about the innovation that is generated and where we are today. For a long time, it was a compromised experience to use cloud versus, there was always less you could kind of do. The experience was a bit less, you had less controls. And I think, therefore, for lots of large enterprises, they resisted cloud. Because they needed control, security, and those things. And if you look, I think, where we are today, on-premises now is behind. If you do something on-premise, there aren't updates or you can't update anymore. Whereas you look at the innovation happening in cloud, and this is good and bad, I guess, is that, we are on the cutting edge of technology every single day. And that technology changes almost overnight.
Yeah.
You think about how your mobile phone ecosystem works with, we've had a bank holiday weekend, right? So my phone this morning had 40 app updates on it. I think I've only got 50 on my phone. Like every app updated. I came in this morning signing to Teams. There was an update for Teams, and I think we're in this space now where that pace of innovation, we absolutely now take for granted. And I was talking to some of our change adoption team last week, and we were talking about some of the training that they go through with people. And, we were kind of going back to the things that we now take for granted from a technology evolution perspective. So obviously we talk a lot about Copilot in the world that we do. And Mini, I know that's kind of your bread and butter here now. But we think about the things that used to go on CVs. And we used to put internet skills on our CVs and FTP and Telnet and these kind of weird things. And now, we're putting things on our CVs and we're seeing CVs of anybody in any role that is talking about prompting.
Prompt engineering,
It's really interesting that kind of how that shift happens. But if I think about, for me, what really defined Microsoft, and it to me goes way back to Windows, right? Of that vision, which was really bold and probably almost seemed unachievable in the day, of putting a PC on every desk in every office. At a time where people didn't have PCs. They didn't have these things. You might have an Atari Games console or BBC Micro if you worked in a school. But if you actually look at how far we've come, that has happened. Everybody has, whether it's a PC, yes, some people have a Kindle or an iPad. But
bring your own device.
Everybody has. Not even one. Multiple. Now, you could argue that's the same with a mobile phone or those kind of things. But you look at the technology that we had back in that day. That was pre-internet. That was pre-start button. That was Windows 3.
You even look at Microsoft with the phones and stuff they had as well. Obviously, they had a period of obviously doing quite well in this space in terms of what they were coming with. And in some cases, even if you look before, they had Windows Phone as well, with the versions that they had with what you could do with it. It was like, it seemed like it was a product that was probably a bit before its time in terms of where they were trying to get to with devices and products. And even things like, I spoke about the Zune earlier, but the Zune's a good example of a device that was probably earlier than obviously the market wanted it, and obviously how that was was phased out very quickly in terms of it. And even like, again, I know we're talking about consumer products, but like the band, obviously technology on your arm, on the watch, that never catch on. And you look at where a lot of people are now with kind of devices that they use, and even down to the early versions of Surface devices with like the RT, things like that as well. That's again a starting point of where they've got that could have gone kind of one or two ways. And for them, obviously, Surface devices are massive in terms of what they're looking
funny,
to
actually,
do.
I wrote down two things earlier about how would I describe Microsoft in words, and the two words I wrote down was innovate and late.
Yep.
Right, and I think there are many things that Microsoft have done that have been so innovative in their approach, and I think you're right. You know, Adam, they're things that have come to market to test the market, and actually, what they've been really bad at. And sorry, Microsoft, you know, I love you. Is sometimes following those things through.
Yeah.
Like you're right. You know, things like Band was a phenomenal thing. I remember having one of the early ones and sitting in a meeting. I was actually doing a disciplinary for somebody, and my band started vibrating, telling me it detected stress. And we're talking 10 years ago. You know, whereas we take this for granted now with you know Apple Watches and those kind of things. But it absolutely was state of the art and innovative. But no one took it on, and I think the same happened with. You know, I would say with search, you know, they were late. You know, they could have dominated that game, absolutely dominated that game, and didn't. And now it's a kind of a world where, you know, people only know the word Google, right? And in search, and that's I think an example of being late. But you're right, things like Surface, I think that's where Microsoft do really well, and I think they've got a lot better at that now because they're all about bringing the rest of the ecosystem on. So you take out the Surface range. That's not about competing. That is about setting the standard for this is the very best experience you're going to have on a device that runs Windows.
Yeah, and embedded into the cloud.
That entire ecosystem all the way through. We did a podcast on this last time, but around that kind of chip to cloud security and ownership of everything all the way through, which is very much what Apple have done, right, and dominated. But you know, in the Surface world, they are leading that design, and all the other OEMs are keeping up, and that's exactly how I see Microsoft should be working. And I think they've done the same with Copilot. As well.
There's one thing I do think that Microsoft need to bring back, however, though, which is the Easter eggs in the Office products.
Weren't they great?
You know, I mean, going back to the days of Word 97 and typing the word blue in a certain font in the colour blue and underlining it, and you got into a flight simulator or whatever it was. There was a pinball game in Excel. Bring that stuff back, please, Microsoft. That was cool.
What was the maze in? Was that Excel?
Oh, I can't remember.
There was a maze, wasn't there, as well? Yeah.
The first-person one, almost sort of Wolfenstein 3D-esque.
Explains why the executables were so big.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
But bring those back. But it's that rate of change and the features that keep coming thick and fast. You know, back in the days, and it wasn't until you applied a cumulative update to your servers did you actually take advantage of those new features or whatever was coming along.
And of course, people didn't, did they? They waited 3 years.
Exactly. Yeah, but it was one of those ones that when those features then arrived, no one really used them, to be honest with you, unless it was sort of a business critical use case scenario requirement. Yeah. But now you look at the roadmaps for all the different technologies in the M365 world, and it's a full-time job keeping up to date with that in itself. Yeah. But it sort of really sort of highlights the importance of working with the likes of Cisilion and your trusted partners in terms of keeping you up to date with what's going on, what the latest and greatest is, keeping an eye out for those features and functions that are going to help you and find efficiencies in your business and the way you're working. You know, the shared number call in Teams, there's been so many organizations in the past that have needed that function, and now it's here.
Yep.
Make the most of it. You know, it's just so much happening. Yeah. So, it's really good to see.
There is one more feature I wanted to talk about, which is LinkedIn. You know, is that Microsoft? Are we allowed to say? You know, I don't know to what extent.
Through acquisition, yes.
Has everyone signed an
NDA? But I mean, I have to say, it's such a powerful tool. And even Microsoft talk about the numbers on LinkedIn, right? When you look at social media posts, you know, from their marketing team. And it is such a powerful tool that's only going to get more advanced and advanced, around personal stories, around professional jobs, AI in general. So I thought I'd throw that in there.
And a very clever acquisition if you think about the way in which we all work, and particularly with, remote and diverse teams with skilling. And, there's been announcements over the last couple of weeks about the new skills agent, which Microsoft's bringing out, which harnesses that LinkedIn data to really help people inside an organization find the best person for the right skill. It can leverage HR data, but it absolutely makes sense bringing in that kind of skill set from someone like LinkedIn. But it's weird, and I think back to my journey at Cisilion. So I've been here certainly the longest of all of you. But when I joined, we didn't have a Microsoft. We didn't do Microsoft here at all. Our name, as many of our listeners and you'll probably know, comes from Cisco, right? We were a distributor called Ilion, and we worked a lot with Cisco. And when we were built, our name came from the CIS from Cisco and the Ilion brand. But very early into my career here, probably 5 years or so I'd been here, we used to do a lot of Cisco Call Manager and on-prem voice upgrade and things. And this thing called Skype for Business, and it was just after Link was sort of a thing, but Skype for Business really. And we started to see quite a lot of traction in that space, Rich, to your point about where UC was going. A lot of that because of that wider integration into the Microsoft suite. And we needed to ensure that we could deliver to our customers what they wanted. So we needed to partner with Microsoft to have a compelling set of UC offerings that either worked alongside Cisco or instead of. And that's really where our Microsoft business started from within Cisilion. And if I look at how that's evolved now, it's enabled us to leverage all the great things that we do around network infrastructure and data center and connectivity with Cisco, and to build that on top of the tools and the products that people use to get work done, which is that Microsoft stack. So I think for us, it was a really great complement actually of the technology, but born purely by accident due to customer demand. And now if I look at kind of where our business model has gone, half our business is Cisco, half of it's Microsoft with a few bits around the edge, and it's been a really great. Reflecting back on it as we often do, it's been a fantastic journey. But I guess if we go back to that point of on-premises services versus cloud, that's also changed, I guess, for all of you. That's very much changed the role of what we do as partners as that technology has evolved, hasn't it?
It has. And look back to some of your comments and the way that we've grown and the growth that we've had in this space, even if we look back to COVID, which feels like a distant memory now. And you mentioned about Teams, and you mentioned about obviously the phone system. It's really interesting, obviously the journey that we've been along, but obviously at the same time events that have obviously helped and enabled us to grow to kind of where we are today as well, because we had Link, obviously Skype for Business, and again we talk about acquisitions with obviously the Skype brand from the consumer world. And if it wasn't for that, we probably wouldn't even have Teams today, because obviously Teams, a lot of that is built upon technologies that were part of Skype from the consumer world in terms of that. And obviously they brought the best parts of both of the products to bring it together to kind of where they are today, and especially your points on phone system and all those type of bits as well. It's been a fascinating journey. But even here, from a personal point of view, I've been here for just over 5 years now, and the growth of Cisilien's business has been amazing in this space. When we talk about the things you've mentioned, we've gone from Microsoft being a small part just to compete and challenge with the way we were seeing some of our customers going. And the point you make now, it makes up nearly 50% of kind of what we're doing. And not only that, we started off with voice, but we've grown into kind of all the areas that are modern work, Azure, Microsoft Security, obviously AI with Copilot, and even like continued the stuff that we're doing with voice, and obviously expanded into meeting rooms and all those type of spaces, especially when we think people come back into the office spaces, how we can make the most of those spaces while still empowering and enabling flexible, hybrid, or whichever form of working people want to do. It's been a fascinating journey.
Yeah, no, it has. And you go back to those days, and again, another UC focus comment from me. You go back to those days with Link and Skype for Business, and it was those simple integrations between the different Office applications, being able to surface your calendar and then update your present status and things like that. Those were just like, for starters, to actually then move on. And I don't know about you guys, but I spend my life in Teams. There's very few times that I will leave Teams and go, and 9 times out of 10 it's to go into Outlook. How long before Outlook gets surfaced in Teams? Probably not long. But it's one of those ones where Teams integrates with everything.
Yeah.
The click of a button, you can go and do whatever you need. There's no need for any other productivity tools out there. It's just one of those ones, and it's crazy to think that those little sort of sprouts of influence from Link and Skype for Business back in the day have led to what you see in Teams nowadays. And it's been an awesome journey. It's definitely not stopping here.
No.
It's where does it stop?
Especially that's with API integration, or things you can do like with forms, we use these sort of features every day, and there's so many cool things you can now do, and there's so much more in the roadmap just with Teams alone, especially like with agents and AI. I know this is a completely different question we're going to go through, but Teams has so much more that's upcoming, and I'm looking forward to seeing what's next.
I think that's what's so incredible when you think actually of I guess this goes back to the partner ecosystem and the way the partners work together as well, is when ChatGPT got announced, when was that? November 22. Microsoft actually were back to that point about being late or innovate. They were very quick to jump on, what was being enterprise chat essentially, right? And we could probably sit all day and talk about, Bing and, its lack of market share. But actually, to take something like that and partner that quickly with, I know that there was an ongoing partnership with OpenAI, but to take that and bring it to market that quickly, I think does demonstrate actually just how far Microsoft have come on from that ability to innovate and disrupt the market. And I think they really have disrupted market. The Copilot Plus devices that is now the only device you can buy now from Microsoft is a Copilot Plus PC. New announcements today with some of the new devices. And I think that, again, is transforming that mindset about not just putting a PC on every desk, but putting AI into the hands of everybody with the kind of concept of always on AI. We think today about AI being, I'm going to ask Copilot to do this, or I'm going to, use an app and, blur a background or delete an object. But we think where this is evolving, and Mini, you touched on this with agents, of within, months, a year, not very long at all, that is how we're going to be interfacing with technology. How do Microsoft put it? Copilot is the UI for AI.
Yeah.
And I really do believe that is where we're heading. We are heading to this point where the way in which we interface with devices, just like it was with the mouse back in the day and Windows and icons and that WIMP environment it was called, wasn't it? We go Windows, icons, mouse and pointer. If I'm going back to my memory days. I'm showing my age. but I think we are again on that cusp of innovation all the way through the operating system. And it's not just because it's an AI thing, but I think the way in which the Microsoft are capturing those hearts and minds of the consumers, of educators, of the enterprise and transforming is keeping us all in jobs. I think it's also involving the jobs that we do, our partners do, customers do. From, if I think back to kind of when I first started my career in IT, we were installing stuff, decommissioning stuff, unplugging stuff. Now a lot more of what we're doing is deploying, enabling, I would say, not even deploying, enabling technology and enabling people to get the best from that technology through adoption, change management, and kind of continuing involvement. And I think displacement. I think one of the areas, again, that I still find quite interesting is that there is so much that organizations that we work with don't know about what is included in the products that they buy.
Yeah.
And that's probably worth just a moment to touch on, because I'm sure you've all got some stories about some of those things.
There's a real shift, though, in the user experience side of things. And it's that time that you're not spending on deploying servers, deploying prerequisites, .NET framework, this, that, and the other and whatnot. You've actually then got the time to repurpose and sit down and spend with customers and say, right, how do you want to use this?
Yeah.
Pointless having a lift and shift. Yeah, it works for some organizations and this, that, and the other. But ultimately, these are all the options that you've got available to you. This is the art of the possible. How do you want us to implement this for you, and how do you want to work with it moving forward? And I think that's the beauty of it, is you're spending less time tapping the keys and clicking the buttons, as it were, like you used to back in the day. And now you're actually spending more quality time with customers, actually understanding their business wants and drivers and needs. And it's more chalk and talk consultancy. But it's good.
No, it is, and like the point the mate said after the .NET, the amount of times you had to install .NET or it didn't work, or it failed on you.
Red text, PowerShell,
yeah. Start again, try it again. Oh, you missed this prereq. Oh, there's an updated prereq. Oh, I can't remember them. But yeah, you're right. You're right in terms of user adoption, change management, how they want to use the tools, even with like Copilot now, and obviously the bots, the agents. Well, sometimes like agents in SharePoint, and obviously just general agents in terms of what you want it to do, consume, and your data. And those sort of things is massive, and it's game changing in terms of options that are there. But the point you make is finding out how users want to use the technology, what problems that they've got, how can we enable them, how can we empower them, how can we fix them. But obviously, again, these are all things that Microsoft have made available to everyone in terms of it. They're not just thought of here's a product that could fix something for a small portion. They're giving you the tools to obviously develop those areas in terms of it. You mentioned APIs and all that sort of
Even look at Microsoft Learn, just the website. There's so much on there. But going back to your point, Rob, in terms of the features, like just even looking at Microsoft Office, just even really basic, how many of us actually do regular training and understanding what feature sets are available in Excel, in PowerPoint? I mean, I went to a promptathon a couple of months ago and we were building...
Well, that's something you never thought you'd be doing,
yeah,
right?
exactly.
5 years ago, if someone's going to a promptathon, you'd be like, what?
Yeah, I know. It's amazing. It's a really good experience if you haven't been for one. But just PowerPoint, I didn't know there was a recording feature available in PowerPoint. And once I got to use that, and that just shows that, in Office itself, that our daily use of tools, how often are we looking back at some of these Office functionalities and seeing, oh, I didn't know this existed. Yeah. I didn't know that could help me enable.
It's when you're sharing your screen and then someone goes, you can do this, right? And you're like, I've been using this tool for like 18 years. Why did no one ever tell me? You know what I mean? It's stuff like that.
I do think it's key though, and we were talking about the partnership that we've got, but that kind of extends itself onto the services that we have to offer and how we keep up to date. Because your point there, Mini, about how many users don't know that you can do that particular thing in an application, and I remember people saying to me, people only use 10% of an application. And there were so many, even like a formula in Excel that's changed, like, from VLOOKUP to XLOOKUP as it is now. I think that's something like 80% more efficient in performance and speed. But for me, that kind of really changes what we have to do and how we are evolving as an organization ourselves, from shifting from that, you sell something, you scope it, you deploy it, and then maybe you help them when it goes wrong and they log a support ticket. Right? But if you think about now that evolution cycle that we go through and we've evolved as a partner, it's a very different skill set and type of employee that we need in order to deliver those needs for our clients.
But even though the point you made there is an interesting point, when you talk about configuring, deploying things, like you think back in the day, you used to obviously group policies, obviously they are still around, but your group policy config on machines. So you need to push this. I want to set this config. I need to set this printer up. I need to run this script. Now, obviously, with the cloud, with Autopilot, with Intune, and the controls within the apps themselves, you've got so much more fluid control to go down to the nth digit rather than it being a blanket. This is the same config for everyone in the org. You can help build those use cases. Going back to your point as well, Rich, it does enable you to be able to be a lot more efficient and accessible to obviously the tools that are there and being able to use them to their maximum benefit. And it does make it easier, I think, from a support perspective. Like back in the day, in terms of being able to configure stuff, it was, I don't know, I need to go over to this team or I need to have a look at this. And you could spend ages trying to go down a proverbial rabbit hole. Whereas now, it's a lot more, we can do that, we can test that, we've got some devices, here you go, and you could probably try and get to the bottom of it a lot quicker, again, more efficient than where you used to be able to.
Yeah, right. I mean, if we think about some of the clients that we work with and how they're using some of these technologies, they're very much gone. When we sit and have outcome-based discussions with customers, it's not so much now about I want to install this product and update it because it's out of date, it's not supported. That used to very much be the conversation. You upgraded a switch because it was out of date or it didn't support. Maybe the latest didn't support 10 gig or whatever. You go back and do those things. You would typically update a PC because it was too old, too slow, or wouldn't run the latest operating system. We're in this kind of cycle now where there is still, to be honest, lots of laggards that are still there going, oh, it's not fair that we've got why can't we keep this 10-year-old operating system and run it on our newer devices? And we still have a lot of that. It's just a thing that runs a thing, and therefore, why should we change? But when we look forward into some of the conversations we're having with customers that are real outcome based, and a lot of this is, yes, driven by AI conversations, but the conversations that the majority of you are having now with clients is about sustainability. It's about having technology that's more inclusive, is more accessible, or is enabling them to do something that it was not possible before. And I think that's a fanatical shift that we've seen.
Yeah.
Especially around security. Consumers or people are using AI in their everyday lives, and it's kind of creating this secure umbrella to be able to use these features in your tenant, because you don't want organizational data going out on other AI tools out there,
very true.
Training large language models. So, that's a huge part of this too.
And a lot of that, I think, comes back to that point about education, doesn't it, as well, of, and there's always that kind of, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. And I think with, the internet is democratized now. Internet's everywhere. Everyone uses it, and no one thinks about it. Like I touched on earlier about we used to put internet skills on our CVs. It's just, you try and tell someone that now, like, what do you mean? But I think the security side is, as you say, is really valid, because AI is now that. You can access it. Every mobile phone you buy has got its version of AI. There's ChatGPT, Copilot, Apple Intelligence,
Gemini,
all those things. And it has just become a tool that you use, right? It's like a calculator. It's a tool that you use. But you're right, in business, that's also a massive risk, because those consumer models, as we touch on, are, obviously Microsoft have got a consumer model and they've got a paid enterprise version. I know some of the other tools out there have as well. But that goes back to that education perspective, and then actually going back to the configuration and security of how do you help organizations protect their corporate data from those AI models that are designed and funded, through training of data, right? It used to be, products either make their money through advertising or they make their money through selling and using your data. And I think it's a completely new revenue stream, but also a massive risk for organizations that I think it's, again, great to see Microsoft doing a lot of stuff with that, as are others. But again, our role has shifted, so we are seeing a lot more security engagements because organizations suddenly have to really care about what they're doing with their data, how it's being secured. And it's not to say they're all terrible, but there used to be a lot of that. People didn't know what was shared. You could only really see what people accessed. There was that mindset of, and I hear there's a lot from clients, of security through obscurity. But when you've got an AI tool like Copilot out there, which is actually really good at uncovering data, that security thing becomes really key.
Yeah, or getting access to certain things. But again, this is not to do with AI. Obviously, getting the visibility into that data is all about what the organization is locking down on that access, right? And it's kind of, these are sort of the best practices even Microsoft are sort of suggesting and putting on the table when you're going for a full adoption on using AI. So it's great that, there's lots of feature sets, products and all these sort of things available, but I guess responsible AI and putting the best practices in, and also understanding what works for an organization and sort of making an adoption successful. I think that's the beauty of the type of things we do as an organization and work with customers on making that adoption journey as safe as possible and as secure and successful.
Yeah, it's for me, it's a funny point because you bring Copilot in and it's going to surface all this information. You've not got the right classifications, the right labels on data and this, that, and the other and whatnot, and all it's doing is highlighting your sort of data governance lack of maturity, should I say, for want of a better phrase. But it's one of those ones where that's not Copilot at fault.
No.
It's the way you're working with your own data internally. And it's one of those ones where at Cisilion as well, we've worked with lots of different organizations. We know that purview configurations, data management, compliance settings, this, that, and the other, not one size fits all, but it's having that experience to know how to go and sit down and talk with organizations and say, look, here's an example of what we could work towards or work backwards from, just to sort of get those creative juices flowing. It's one of those ones, again, you might work a certain way now, that doesn't mean you've got to carry on working that way moving forward. And again, coming back to that more consultative approach, I think, and sort of less away from that sort of engineering sort of mindset. But it's an interesting one. But it just shows the sort of the speed and rate of change of all these new features that are coming down the line. But again, you need those building blocks. You need Entra to be in place and to be configured in the right way. You then need your governance policies, your wraps, your security around how you're going to access that data. But then who can access that data and who can do what with it?
And it's working with the right people in an organization, because the person who's looking at Copilot might be a completely different person to the person who works in compliance or security and data security.
Pull in a list of salaries for everyone in the business because it's not controlled.
It's good to include everyone into these conversations.
It's probably the one recent bit of technology. That's a really uneducated way of saying it, but it's probably the one product, if you think about Copilot as a product set within Microsoft, that has truly force the uniting of teams within organizations. So I think you're right, the exchange migration would have been done by, no one would know, no one would care. Right? No one gets it. No one cares that there's an email upgrade being done. No one cares. To an extent, no one cares that an operating system's being updated. Right? Really, it's just disruption for people. Right? People click on start and load an application.
How many times did you see it where Link or Skype for Business was managed by the messaging team because they didn't know where to put it?
Well, and I think Microsoft definitely does blur a lot of those boundaries, right? But I think what AI has done, and we touched on a lot of these things, that you're a collab guy. You told us this at the beginning. You're only going to talk about collaboration. You've just been talking about security, right? But the way in which organizations have to come together to adopt and harness the power of something like Copilot is unilateral across the organization. If you think about the way that our business has had to evolve, Copilot appeared from nowhere one Monday morning. I remember the day it was announced, and we jumped on a webinar actually very, very quickly. I remember dragging some Microsoft people in who were really scared because they'd only just found out about it themselves. And no one knew what to say. There was no content, no collateral, and everyone was scrabbling to try and work out what it was they could talk about. And if I think where we are now, 2 and a bit years later, every time we are working with a customer through any form of engagement about any piece of technology, AI is always at the center of kind of the conversation. But we are involved in the collaboration teams, the infrastructure teams, the security teams, the compliance teams, the governance teams, the training teams, because this stuff is just fusing these departments together. And actually, if I think about how we've evolved, massive. You look back at some of the projects that we did 2 years ago versus today, and the numbers of departments that we're involved in, the complexity of some of those things, and they are all output driven, whereas they didn't really used to be. They were about product. And that, I think, is phenomenal how it's shifted.
Yeah, and I think industries are catching up. So before, it might be one particular type of industry, sort of at the forefront of this sort of cutting edge technology. But actually now, if you have conversations across different industries, different organizations, they are all exploring this now. They are all in different types of their journey, from beginning to middle, trying to adopt to already using it in its full-fledged way.
Well, they need to, and I think as well, some of the points, like if you look at the education sector now, especially with exams, and there's tools and things that people have got out there to stop looking at things like plagiarism and those type of things, or using the tools, because you were talking about internet skills earlier, Rob, and the kids now will be picking up these type of skills, the tools, and be using those things for their own benefit. They're not going away learning, they're just using it and trying to use it for their own benefit really quickly. And again, that creates challenges, again, for organisations, the data, the security, and those type of things, if you haven't put those building blocks in place that you mentioned to start off with.
What better generation to pick that up, though?
Yeah.
Both my boys, one's 11, one's 8, tablets, phones, it just becomes second nature to them.
But now I think it's conversation. So one of the things that, I think to many, we're just showing our age in the room, but I think for, particularly me, 50 years, but I think for many, it's still, this is a bit gimmicky, this is quite quirky. But my son, who's 10, nearly 10, just talks to this stuff. He just talks to Copilot, right? As if it was a human, and you don't realise, and that's great, and we can go into some of the ethics around this, I'm sure, another day, but it is really interesting. But Listen, I thought as we kind of we're getting into some quite deep avenues, and perhaps this is a topic for another podcast actually about security, governance, compliance. I think that'd be a really interesting one to cover around this. But I thought, seeing we're celebrating this kind of 50 years, right? I thought we'd have a little bit of fun at the end, because I'm sure we've all got some really geeky knowledge about quirky Microsoft things that were or are or happened or didn't happen. So I thought we'd just go around the room, right, and maybe play a little bit of a do you remember type game. So now you can't answer this, you two, because I asked you this question earlier. Okay, but Mini, you touched on earlier about some of your fondest memories, and I think one of them was about creating your first Hotmail account.
Yeah.
Right? So I don't know if everyone remembers, but actually, Rich, I'm going to ask you this question. Why do you know why it was called Hotmail? And what the significance was of Hotmail?
I've got
Microsoft
two,
Mail system.
and I have no idea.
So I will tell you this fact because it's really sad. But so firstly, Hotmail was the first rich text mail platform on the web, right, using HTML.
Right.
And if you look at the letters of Hotmail, it was the capital H. And if you look at how it used to be written, if you kind of do a Bing image search, obviously, it was capital H, small o, large T, large M. Large M, small a, AI, big L. So if you put the big capital letters HTML, that's actually where that came from. Yeah, that's where that
Boom,
came
mic
from.
drop.
Yeah.
Rob's job's
Fun
done.
fact.
Yeah.
That's a really cool thing to
fun
know.
But we touched on earlier some other kind of products that we all remember. We were talking about security, right? So Microsoft now, largest security company in the world that a lot of people wouldn't really think about.
No, they wouldn't.
But we talked about some of the products that we used to deal with. Like we were talking about Microsoft Proxy Server 2. I remember deploying
But
that.
it's a theme though, Rob. Because going back, again, I can't stop talking about it. OCS, LCS, Link.
Yeah.
I used to speak to my Cisco counterparts and they used to call it, Fisher Price, my first phone system.
But
and that's how it was
times
looked
have
upon.
changed.
But the fact of the matter is, again, you talk about the security, a few years ago, even quite recently, Microsoft was sort of laughed at from a security standpoint.
Yeah.
Not laughing
And now
at.
where is Purview, Defender, Sentinel, Gartner charts, it's
Everything.
Copilot for security, it's
You've
huge.
got security, chip to the cloud, from the hardware in their devices, the Pluton processors, all the way up to, like you say, Defender in the Cloud, Secure Futures Initiative. I mean, they've had to, right? But they've responded really, really well to that because they power pretty much every industry in the world, right? And they still support lots of legacy technology. I mean, Adam, I forget what we were chewing over earlier on, but you were talking about banking, right? And some of that, and
cash machines and stuff like that.
Cash
It used to
machines
run
running
on
these
versions of
really
XP.
dedicated, secure, embedded devices. I mean, how often do you walk up at a train station and see a blue screen of death that's a Windows 7?
Wow.
Go to
device,
Euston
right?
Station.
Thinking about bad products, you very rarely see a Vista device, right? Let's be honest, right? That was, let's think about that. How many, we think about all the things that were good, right? So we had the successor Windows 3, right? Let's be honest, that is what drove that goal, that mission that they had. We then had Windows 95 that was the game changer for the UI. I mean, it absolutely is what shaped the way in which we interface with technology today. If you think about, the Android devices and Apple devices, we have this familiarity with the start button, which kind of came from those days of Windows. We had 95, we had 98, which you could kind of argue, did we need it? But it was a solid OS, right? I mean, it kind of went a bit odd, didn't it? We had Windows ME.
Yeah.
It then became an on-off type of situation where one release was good, next release maybe not so good. I was going to do a Gennaro Gattuso reference there, but not on this podcast. But it was one of those ones where it was just flipping between. But I don't think you can say that now. I think Windows 10 and Windows 11, I think they've been consistently good.
Yeah, there was an argument a long time whether there'd be a version, and it's interesting. Like when we were talking about some of the cloud stuff earlier on, like a lot of us remember the days of Exchange 5.5 and Windows. I remember doing Windows 2000 upgrades as well in jobs and Active Directory and things. But it was all about the versions, right? And even today, we look at on-prem versions that are going end of life. And cloud's interesting because there are no versions. There is no version of Microsoft 365. There is no version of Teams. There is no version of a lot of the products that are out there. They're just always on, evergreen.
Yep.
Yet we're in this kind of weird world, aren't we, where we still have, Windows nearly went down that route. Windows nearly went down the route of just being Windows as a service and not having a version. And I think industry quite likes a version. We all like to get our new Samsung S24, 25 or our iPhone 16 or whatever, Night 7, I don't know what they're up to now on the iPhone side. I'm not an Apple person, but we quite like our version numbers, don't we? And it's a weird mix.
Yeah.
So come on, give me some product memories.
I remember I had a colleague of mine from the Cisco team come to me and say, Rich, I've got a call manager that needs to hook into 2 different Active Directory instances. And I was thinking, how are we going to do this? And I settled on lightweight directory services, Adam. No, Adam was what you referred to it as. But that for me was a real quirky one. Never touched it before or anything like that. Never played with it. But, in some strange ways, I do miss that, the hooking something together, breaking it, putting it back together and fixing it again. It's one of those ones, but again, that's me being relatively old.
Did you have the TechNet DVDs?
It was. I made a
move.
MSDN,
wasn't it?
Yeah, I made a move probably about 10 years ago from a previous employer, and the organisation that I joined, they had a lot of Microsoft MVPs there, a lot of bloggers, and this, that, and the other. I was like blown away. I was like in awe of all these rock stars that I was seeing when I walked into the office, because they're all the people that I learned from. And again, continuing that on, coming and working with you guys here at Cisilion. I've only been here since November, by the way, but it's one of those ones. It helps me put the laptop on and turn it on at 9 o'clock in the morning on a Monday. So but outside of that, threat management gateway. That was always a fun one. And then it being replaced by IIS ARR again. Sometimes I look back and think, how did I even get that stuff working? But there's been some funky products out there that are no longer really used in the modern workplace anymore, thankfully.
Yeah, and TMG in itself was, stayed around for a lot longer.
You needed to be an expert in that in your own right just to get it working, you know what I mean? But
But let's be honest, they are the king of, they must own the record for the most number of acronyms in the world. Mm-hmm. I think they almost must own the record as well for the company that renames their products the most.
Yep.
Even in Copilot journey, right? Or MSN Messenger, MSN
Messenger. I'm sure we've all got that. I'm sure we've all got memories of MSNing, haven't we? The day. But again, it's another example of something that started not started it because they didn't start it, but they made it mainstream and they normalized it. It became that thing that went from, what was it, IRC chat, wasn't it? And very textual based things and bulletin boards and those kind of things to taking something and just normalizing it and making it really, really simple for anybody to use and just driving that. And when they get it right, they get it really right. Yeah. When we touched on getting things wrong, when they get it wrong, sometimes they totally get it wrong, or they just miss the mark a bit too late and they walk away. And I think, Satcher said a couple of times over the last few months about, some of the things they wish they'd stuck at. They wish they'd taken search seriously at the time. They didn't. They had an opportunity to. They didn't. They wish they'd got it. They wish they'd persisted with phone.
Yep.
Because again, I think they were too late, and then they just didn't monopolise on it, and they didn't understand consumer. And I think that's probably still something I think about, critiquing, that I think has still been a struggle. I think from an enterprise space, commercial space, they absolutely get that world. They absolutely rock that world. They get it. They understand it. They listen to every organisation. They listen to every sector. They unify that messaging. Consumer is still, I think, quite a confusing space, and I'm not sure they really know what to do.
Well, with Copilot right now, my 6-year-old talks to Copilot, and we've been creating using Visual Creator video like dinosaurs doing gymnastics. It's pretty cool what you could do out there. So from a consumer perspective, I think, and even I talk to organizations who talk about a potential E7 upgrade plan in the future. I think from a driver perspective, we spoke about consumers using product and services and getting that feedback and how they are creating more and more using that feedback into their space and what they're releasing out to the market, what's in their roadmap. And in terms of what organizations are doing, I mean, you can see the feedback button everywhere now, in Copilot itself, in all the engagements I'm running, feedback surveys are key for them to keep getting better and better. So,
And I think that's a great thing, because I think in the past, they probably didn't necessarily take on all that feedback, or it probably went to a generic mailbox. I know when we're involved in a lot of the programs now, and they say, give us the feedback. That feedback is going directly to the product teams.
Make sure you wrap that, what I mean?
Make sure you put that in there.
But I think that's so important, again, because... And I'll bring this back to us in a moment, but because things are now cloud, and there is this natural standardization, integration capability. So we talk, it used to be, you're in the ecosystem, you need to use those products because otherwise things won't work. You touched earlier on about how easy it was to have Link and Skype lighting up, and you couldn't really do that very easily with other products that weren't, without these other clunky apps that used to crash all the time.
You want this feature, you'll need another server for that.
Yeah.
Whereas now everything is about extensibility and interoperability and standards. So I think consumers, particularly consumers, but enterprises, commercial clients have so much choice. There is so much out there. There is so much cutting edge technology that you can just switch on with a license key. There is nothing to install, nothing to configure, and that's great and bad at the same point. And so I think the buying cycle has changed. We see departments buying products that I remember talking to a client, a year or so ago about, modernizing and moving from on-premise to cloud still, right? And that was a big Microsoft 365 transformation. And as part of that, we were talking to different departments within this organization, and they were like, we're talking about, we've already got all this file sharey stuff, we collaborate on stuff, and they'd gone and another department had gone and bought a completely non-Microsoft, it's another product that they'd gone and they were paying for on a credit card, and they were doing all the things that the business was trying to sell them, they're already using. So when I think about our role, and Adam, I'll probably throw this at you just because you kind of run that team, but thinking about the future for us, right? And I don't want to sit here and try and tell the future around what's going to happen with quantum and this and everything else in the future, because we could all talk about that. But how do you ensure, I guess, that your team stay relevant? And what's your advice for our customers, right? Because we're in this space where every day, you wake up every day and the world sometimes has changed. New products, new services, new updates.
Yeah, and it's a great question, and it's difficult to kind of always answer
That's what
works for everyone. Because again, if I try and break that down into its component parts, and I look at our team, first of all, individuals, you've got to want to be interested in learning, first of all, because as you've said, Rich, and obviously Mini, Rob as well, you go and consume the content. So learn.microsoft.com is a great place to obviously go and get lots of information around the products, how to use them, how to configure them in terms of that as well. But equally, go to events, go to user groups. Those type of things are really good as well, because you have community leads, like you've spoken about, MVPs, and those type of things, which is useful because they inherently have access to some of the product groups and have information or knowledge that they specialise in their certain areas that they're an MVP in. And at the user groups, they can obviously offer these information to people outside of that. But equally, this is where partners come in as well to help drive that and their understandings in terms of that. But as organisations, go to Microsoft conferences. A lot of the events now that Microsoft offer are free of charge. And again, I look at what they used to be like in events to what they are now, and obviously they're expensive outfits to be able to go to. Whereas now it's literally you register, you turn up, and you can consume so much content, not just from partners, but obviously from Microsoft themselves. They speak at a lot of these events and things like that as well. So I would say the main thing is learn, keep your ear to the ground, consume the content that's out there, and collaborate with peers, colleagues, and those type of things. Probably the best way.
You've got to have love. You've got to have love, and you've got to have appetite, and I think you, Adam, and myself, we're very, very fortunate to have people in our teams that fit into those molds.
Yeah.
People who just want to know more and more and more, and aren't afraid to put themselves in those difficult situations when it's the first time you're doing something. And the fact of the matter is, when these technologies are so new, a lot of the times you're doing things for the first time. And yes, you'll have read up all about it on Microsoft Learn and yes, and all that, watch as many training videos as you possibly can. But when that technology is brand spanking new, that you're going to be learning along the way with customers sometimes. And I think that again in itself is an advantage of working with Cisilion, blowing our own trumpet here by saying this, but ultimately, you're going to get honesty. You're going to get proper advice and guidance from working with people in my team, in Adam's team, with Mini, and chatting with Rob. It's one of those ones where we'll be very upfront and honest with organisations to say, look, this is brand new. We've never done it before, but we'll certainly work it out and we'll box it off. But again, it's all about that appetite. If you want to learn these new technologies, then that's how you keep one step in front of everyone.
It does very much shift, I think, a mindset, and I think we're getting a cloud started that from a point of view of you're always on the latest version of something. Therefore,
dynamic stability, I heard it referred to as well.
Dynamic stability. There we go.
Who remembers the word software assurance?
Oh, software assurance. Absolutely, yeah. But I think the other thing, and it's it's funny. I used this a long time ago when we first started doing our Copilot change management engagements, and I remember a customer saying to me, we don't want to be too bleeding edge. Like, that used to be a term that was kind of being used, and I remember saying to them, which was probably a really bad thing to say in hindsight, but I said, look, you do need to bear in mind the version of Copilot you're using today is the worst version of it you will ever use. And they said, well, we don't want that. We want the best version of it. And I said, but you will never use the best version. The version you use today is the worst, but it was only ever going to improve. And I think one of the things that I think is really important for any organization, and I guess for any partner, is you really need to think about that technology evolution and that adoption training and that life cycle service of technology. And I think those days of deploying something, and actually even through deployment, we were doing a big deployment of Office 365 for a customer literally a couple of years ago. And we had adoption and change going on through the program. They had a program of works happening, and they were turning on different services through the program. But whilst they were doing that and training people, the products were updating. There was new features, and not just a new feature, new UI. The UIs were changing. So we have training material and content that we had kind of curated, and that's out of date all the time. So you do need to continually shift your interpretation and the way that organizations work together as well. I think it's no longer about just training people. It's almost teaching people how to learn again.
It's knowing that adoption and change management is so much more than just training. It's about that reinforcement. It's about having champions. It's having the right communications. Absolutely. It's about having the proper drop-in mechanisms, different training styles with different people, with different learning styles. It's that whole kit and caboodle. Yeah. If you've got someone who's a champion for a certain product, they're going to be sat there evangelizing, shouting out about these new features and functions. That makes that sell to the rest of the business and the rest of the users within a department, for example, just so much easier. So,
you look at the experience in terms of even looking at the GPT models. You got 4.0, 4.5, and look at Microsoft. They're already working on their own MAI 1, and that's obviously in the roadmap too. So, going back to your point, the worst version, for example, is only going to get better. But look at where Microsoft's investing. And what's up and coming in their roadmap. And I think the big part of that large language model and multiple ones that are coming into Copilot and the features within, say, Excel, within PowerPoint, or just in general and with agents, I think it's there is a lot more that's up and coming.
So I guess my closing thought might be in a year's time on the 51st anniversary. Will we be sitting here with an AI in our audience having a conversation? So I'm going to leave that thought there.
As long as it brings Flight Simulator and pinball back to the office products, I'm all in.
in an Easter egg, of course. In an Easter egg. Team, thank you so much for going over some of your memories and futures and tips and guidance
thank
for
you, Rob.
Colleagues and customers and Microsoft out there as well. So thank you everyone for listening, and remember to like, follow, subscribe, all of those things, and watch us again in the next podcast. Thank you.